One kind of underrated way to building a brand online is comment. Insightful comments on people's posts that you admire, a colleague of yours or somebody in the space in your career that you kind of see for yourself, commenting on their posts. I think people are always kind of just surprised at the connections you can build, whether it's just making a new connection, adding somebody to your network, or a job opportunity or a collaboration opportunity or a speaking engagement. I think creating content and building your reputation online somewhere with content creation is like a way to just kind of keep your portfolio current and showcasing what you're good at. You don't want to start that when you're all of a sudden out of a job maybe, or just in a transition period. You don't want to be starting fresh.
Welcome to the Science with Impact podcast, where we explore how scientists and researchers can broaden the societal impact of their work. Today, we're joined by Jeff Kozlovsky, and we're really excited to talk about marketing and communications. Jeff, would you be willing to introduce yourself?
I'm Jeff. I work as a marketing strategist at the University of Rochester School of Medicine and Dentistry. A big part of my job is helping to build the digital reputation of our research that comes out of the institution and the research education. So I focus a lot on working with the folks in our graduate education spaces. So the PhDs, the masters, the advanced certificate trainees, and faculty doing research in the biomedical sciences. A big focus of mine lately has been, we always tell them that in order to build our digital reputation as a school, we can't be the only ones out there talking about the great work we do. It makes a big difference when it comes from an actual human versus when people see a message from an institution. So a lot of what I'm doing lately is trying to equip and inform our trainees and faculty on how to better communicate their work.
Can you share something that surprises you as you navigate your role in terms of, I didn't know that this was unique or complicated, or that this was this way before I started this role?
Just the fact, I think, that those in research are not really trained to then communicate that message elsewhere. Like, a big part of the training is you do your work, you do the research, and it gets published in a journal, and that's it. And then it stops there. And so there's not a lot of education on how to share that further and get it in front of the people that probably need to hear it.
I'll say from my experience, I almost lost some of my ability to communicate with normal human beings about what I was doing as I was learning, because graduate school was such a download. I remember sitting at the table in my lab for one of our first group meetings, and we were asked to read a paper. And I read it the way I'd always read any content. I just kind of read it, tried my best to understand it. I had judgments about like the graphic design, because that's something that stood out to me back then. And I sat down, and the way that my advisor would talk about the paper and deconstruct the philosophy of it for us and model that behavior, I was astounded. Like, wow, this is like a whole nother level of intellect that I'm going to have to stretch up to. And as I did, I kind of started to lose my ability to communicate in a colloquial way.
I know grad school is such a grind, and it's so easy, it seems like, to get laser focused on that. Like, if you're a PhD, like laser focused on just qualifying and then getting your thesis, whatever needs to happen, getting that done. And then just so thinking about anything else besides that, I know, is difficult when you're in those shoes.
I've become a little bit better at communicating these things by thinking of the papers, the research articles that I write, as the manual. You get a new piece of technology and it comes with a little manual, and you pop it open just to see, like, how do I turn it on? How do I do the basics? But very rarely do you sit there and read the technical specifications. But we write those manuals. That's the type of writing that we're doing. We're communicating how this works to other technicians, basically, to other scientists. And then thinking about, like, okay, that's the manual for, say, the vacuum, but what is the marketing and the advertising and the communicating in their blog posts and their social media? What does that look like? Because it's almost never, hey, we've released the newest version of our manual, version 16.12. It's changed quite a bit. You're going to want to read it. Like, almost none of us would interact with that.
I love that way of thinking, because then, yeah, you have to think like, How are people that actually need to know this information going to use this vacuum? Like, what would make them want to purchase this thing?
Whatever you're creating needs to be useful to the person that you expect to consume it. So
Yeah.
if you have other researchers to read it, then that's why we write it in the IMRAD structure so that they can flip to whatever section that they need to understand your work. If that's who you're writing to, that's who you're going to reach. And so understanding like how do I write this to the middle schooler who's curious about the latest advancements in shape memory alloys. It's so simple, but it's not easy to do.
No, it is a skill that, like anything, with repetition gets better with practice.
Why should our listeners, who are primarily research scientists and organizations looking to broaden their societal impact, tune into our conversation?
We are at a time now, as we record this in 2025, where scientists need to be able to communicate effectively with the public. Simple as that. And I hope if you tune into this episode, it will spark an idea, give you some inspiration, or just make you more curious about how you can do that.
How did you come to know me and this podcast and Science with Impact as a whole?
So I think I stumbled upon a clip on LinkedIn and I wanted to make sure I gave this person credit because I think they were the first guest of yours on the show, Ayana Lynch, who was a guest back in the summertime. She was the one that popped up on my feed somehow and was talking about storytelling and things that I was interested in the science space. I was like, oh, I probably could learn from this person on other things I should be telling our trainees and faculty here in Rochester. And then so I clicked to learn more, and yep, there she is. And I saw that she was on the Science with Impact podcast, and I was like, what is this Science with Impact? That's how I learned about you and your work. And yeah, Science with Impact seemed just like something I should be learning from.
So honored that you found us, and thank you so much for being open to listening to our content. Do you think you could tell us a story about an impactful moment that led to you working with scientists to communicate in this way?
It's funny, I'm probably one of your only guests that doesn't have an extensive science background. I shouldn't assume, but I might be one of the few anyway. Working at University of Rochester, I've been here a little over 4 years, and this is actually my first experience working with other scientists. My background is in the creative space and marketing and communications, and I worked for Johns Hopkins a few years back in their alumni office. So there were some scientists I interact with there, researchers, but otherwise, that was really it. But when I first started at University of Rochester and really started to learn about, just get to know the people behind the research, you get to see just how important the basic research that they're doing is. That's who I work with, mainly the folks doing basic sciences and basic science work. To see how important that is, because you see like, oh, this vaccine was developed, or we have now these vaccines to do all these wonderful things. But it started with basic science research, and that's where a lot of it begins. And it's so important to understand that. And then on top of that, just hearing the passion that comes from the researchers doing the work and how much they care about it and the time and effort they put into stuff that they fail at a lot or get the answers they weren't looking for. It's like, okay, these are the stories I want to tell. These are the people I want to talk to.
So exciting. And I'm really glad that you found your way into this space because we need people like you. We need people who are curious and interested in science, but can help us better put into stories and terms and visuals that people will resonate with. As you go back through your childhood, could you find any clues or indications of the role that you would eventually serve?
I don't know as far as like going back to childhood, but I knew as far as like storytelling, I took a journalism class in high school, I think my junior year, and part of that was doing the morning announcements and being on TV like for the school and sharing what's on the lunch menu that day and how our local sports teams did the night before. Shout out LTV, my first broadcasting experience. And like just that journalism class and that experience kept me interested in storytelling. And I went to college for broadcasting. Like I was dead set on being a sports broadcaster. That is not an easy field to get into, but quickly found out that there are other ways to share stories. And I graduated college in 2009 when the job market was terrible and had to take jobs where I could get them, and slowly worked my way into nonprofits and did eventually work in sports and then worked for nonprofits again and then higher ed, all because I had this background in storytelling and had a fascination with learning new tools and technology. Like I could geek out over things like podcast equipment all day long. I've just always kind of been interested in storytelling, and I guess interested in the tech behind it and tools to make that job easier and more impactful.
It's interesting because sometimes people know really young and sometimes they don't. And I think normalizing those discussions is important.
I remember like my first trip to New York City, I wanted to be a taxi driver because I thought that was the coolest job ever. And then I wanted to be a math teacher for a while because I had a good math teacher in high school who also happened to be my track coach. But then it was like that journalism class was then it was like, all right, I'm going to I'm going to do this thing.
Show us the way, and then we try it on and decide if we like it. And whether that happens in childhood or in our 50s or whenever that happens, I think it's a great blessing to get to redefine yourself over and over and over again. What are some concrete steps that researchers can take to build their personal brand and thought leadership beyond just becoming a full-time content creator?
When people hear personal brand, they usually think, and I used to too, like you think content creator, you think influencer. I feel like there's such a connection there between personal branding and being an influencer, but it really doesn't have to be that. Personal brand is more like your reputation, and more that's online. To build your personal brand, one great first step, like I'll use LinkedIn a lot throughout this because I think that's just such a powerful platform now, building an online personal brand. You don't have to always be creating your own content. There are different ways you can use social media to build that reputation that don't involve posting all the time. I like there's kind of four different personalities you can be on social media, and shout out Dr. Elizabeth Murray here at University of Rochester Medical Center. She showed me this way of looking at it first. So there's people that are the lurkers online. You're on social media, but you're not commenting, you're not really doing anything, you're not engaging, but you're there to learn, soaking up the information. So we have the lurker, secretly in the space to learn. The seeker means you're openly in a space to learn, and that involves commenting, liking, just interacting with posts. And one kind of like underrated way I feel like that isn't talked about enough to building a brand online is comment. Insightful comments on people's posts that you admire, or you just a colleague of yours or somebody in the space in your career that you kind of see for yourself, commenting on their posts. And it doesn't always have to be super insightful. It could just be like, oh, I loved this article. Can't wait to hear more from you, or appreciate what you're doing, or thank you. But insightful comments that show your expertise are going to show up not only the person that posted that content, but other people that engage with that post. And that post is then going to appear more in people's news feeds. That is a great way to build that personal brand, because the more you comment on content around a specific topic, you're going to be associated with that particular field. So that is a kind of an underrated way to build a brand. And then just the other personalities here, then you can be a curator. So that's sharing and educating your audience. So you're sharing content to your page and building that feed. If somebody comes to your LinkedIn profile and they see everything you've shared, it's like, oh, that's what they're going to associate you with. And then, of course, we talked about full-time content creator. That's when you start to kind of generate your own material and your own take. A first step is getting out, following people you admire or see yourself maybe in their shoes one day, and then start just doing those simple interactions like commenting.
So helpful to think about the different roles and approaches that you can take to engaging with this sort of, I don't know, this content creator ideology. So my husband and I are both entrepreneurs, and one thing we struggle with is we'll find ourselves really overthinking. When I look at other people's content, I realize just how simple it is to be influential with what you post by just modeling what you're actually curious about and what you find interesting about things. And sharing that without an agenda of trying to get it to come back in terms of revenue or contracts or anything like
Mm.
that. Like it's been very clear to us that we are overthinking things, and a great example of that is this incredible YouTuber who reviews parking lots. That's like her whole thing.
Wow.
She just reviews parking lots and she
I
gives
had
you
no
her.
idea.
It's so great. I love watching it. And it's so like relaxing and funny, and she's got such a dry sense of humor, and it's just her talking about a parking lot. And you would think that couldn't possibly be interesting, but the way that she does it is. And so it's just we're overthinking it.
That gets into a lot of like perfection is the enemy of good enough. It is so easy to get in our own ways, but a lot of times it is good enough and you should post it. And it's important to share failures or what you're curious about, but also just like things that didn't work. Like, oh man, I tried this today and it just didn't work out for me. Has anybody else experienced the same thing? And then just incorporating your personality into it. That makes you unique. So many trainees I talk to kind of get caught up on the fact like, what am I going to talk about that others haven't already? And it's like, well, you can own that your particular experience right now. Like you are in graduate school going through XYZ program in Rochester, New York. Like that's not everybody has that experience. So talk about that.
Yeah, there's nothing that anyone can do to copy you.
I saw a channel today that was all about golf carts.
Cool.
Like, and it was just a mention in a newsletter I read, Golf Cart TV. But this guy like is clearly knows everything there is to know about golf carts, and that is a great niche.
What are some of the most random content that you consume?
I love card magic. I consume a lot of magician stuff. So that is something from being a kid I was always just interested in. So sometimes on meetings, I will be off to the side, just like shuffling cards with a playing card deck. I'm looking at a lot of my subscription lists right now. I've got Card Magic by Jason. I've got a guy who does card magic on a cruise ship. So that's, I guess, very random for this podcast.
I think that's really cool. And it's funny because it's in those little sub interests that your spice exists. Because if you could
Yeah.
do storytelling with sleight of hand, with a
Mm.
card trick, now it's like you're combining whatever your content matter is with your personality and your interests.
I've talked to ChatGPT a little bit about how I can start weaving in card magic with marketing and stuff. I haven't quite put together a routine yet, but maybe it's coming.
What are some of the biggest barriers or hesitations that you've seen from researchers when it comes to communicating their work publicly, and how have you helped them to overcome those?
A big one is just time. Everybody's busy with their working lives and lives outside of work, that adding something else on top of that, like communicating about their work, this seems like just such a task and it is time consuming. I just think you have to kind of think of it as your work though. So I know a lot of folks that do well on social media, for example, they work it into their working week. Like they set aside 10 minutes, 30 minutes on a Monday, just look at their feed, interact with a post, set a goal of like commenting on something today or creating. And like if you're at that point, that's your time to create and schedule posts out for the week. It just has to be something that is worked into your work week. And I know when I get caught up in this too, like my personal brand isn't part of my full-time job. It kind of is, and it's important. Like I feel like we should all be thinking about our careers and building our own portfolios, and that is, I think, equally as important. But especially if you're sharing work that comes out of your full-time job, I think it should be looked at as work, and you're building your reputation, you're building your institution's reputation, you could be building your colleagues up. So it is important. So time is one thing. Another thing is fear of backlash. And that's understandable because I'm not ashamed to say social media can be quite the dumpster fire. So I understand like people being like, oh yeah, I don't want to be the recipient of the next troll. And I think the reality is though, like, especially when you're in like a healthcare space or science space, like they're just going to be out there. And a lot of people wouldn't want to hear that. Okay, well, then you're confirming my assumption that there will be backlash. And I think when you're talking about topics that are important enough, that's just going to come. But platforms like LinkedIn, people aren't really on that platform for that. That's why I love LinkedIn so much too. Like most of the conversation is civil, and other platforms you can't really say the same. I also say too, like there's the fear of like people saying I'm wrong, and which is also backlash. But I get caught up in this too. Like when I'm thinking about sharing something on my page about what I learned about podcasting this week, or people are going to think that's silly or too basic. But it's like, why would anybody, if they do, there's clearly something wrong with them or something going on in their life that doesn't affect you. But why is somebody going to come after me for just sharing something I'm excited about or something I learned? And like with research, those are a lot of what you're sharing are facts that you found out through lots of work and data analyzing and stuff like that. So if you're sharing facts and things you just learn along the way and you're asking for help, like how can people hate on that? That's kind of what I say around the time aspect and that fear of backlash.
A very small minority of people have a gift for finding what's wrong with things and making their voices heard over all the positivity that can be existing out there in the world. And the thing that's been really helpful to me, and as I raise two young ladies through their childhoods, is there will be people who swing at you verbally, hopefully not
Mm,
physically, but over the things that you believe in, that you take interest in, that you
mm,
advance in the world. And I've created kind of a filter in my own mind of whose voices I listen to and who I don't, so that when I'm confronted with these sorts of trolling behaviors, I can know how to sort it out from genuine feedback that I should be listening to. And for me, it's two things. Does this person have my best interest at heart? That's the number one thing. And two, have they achieved the missions that I'm seeking to achieve with what I'm doing? If those two things are true, I'll listen. I will genuinely listen. If those two things, especially not the first one, if those are not true, then they're just white noise to me and I just hear. So when I'll read through their posts, I'll kind of imagine that blurry effect that you can put on
yes.
messages. I kind of just pretend that exists and I move on because they
I
haven't
love it.
achieved the mission that I'm trying to achieve. They don't understand what I'm trying to do. So who are they to give me, crap about what it is that I'm trying to do?
And usually those aren't the people that are on the verge of you would hit the hide comment button or the block button. Like it's people that have done what you're doing and have the best interests of your mission in mind, like interact in a civil way for the most part, right?
Especially like you said on LinkedIn. I agree.
Yeah.
I think when your name is attached to your affiliation and it's all very clear what role you play
Mm-hmm.
and where you live, I think you're a lot more keen on watching how you act.
Yeah,
Right? Because you don't want to be unprofessional in a space that's meant for professionalism. Whereas a platform like X or one of those ones where you can create a handle that is just
hmm,
right
yeah,
and your name's not associated, your affiliation isn't clear, where you live isn't clear,
yeah,
that's when I think the keyboard warriors come out because now they have a mask that they can hide behind.
for
And
sure.
holding them to business over what they say isn't as easy. And so they feel a little bit more free to be out of pocket. Could you tell me more, Jeff, about how you integrate making content into your workflow?
A lot of what I do in marketing communications is creating content. It is just like part of my job anyway. But then, like, when it comes to my personal brand, I've kind of taken the advice of a lot of the folks I've learned about that I've talked to, whether it's through a podcast or through putting together presentations for our trainees. I've tried to be better about setting some time aside to create something for myself. But you also have to remember, like, there's all the social media channels. There's newsletters, there's podcasts. You could do video, you could write, and then you could get overwhelmed by trying to be everywhere all the time. So I've tried to do a better job at focusing on one thing and getting better at it. I've recently started a newsletter. I have like 10 subscribers right now, which is fine, but it's getting me practice in writing and I'm trying to put out an issue every other week. It's getting me used to setting a schedule to write, to publish, and all that good stuff. And it's just forcing me to look at my work in different ways and think now. I'm always trying to think like it is hard to keep up a regular publication like that. So anytime I see something now, like my notes app on my phone is up and I'm like, ooh, that was a good comment from somebody on the Bobby Bones show that I listened to. I could probably talk about that in my newsletter. So it's like just being in tune to what is going on around you, things people say, and the stuff you consume and how you can kind of relate it to what you do. And that's just to help me be a little more creative in my work, but focusing on one thing at a time. And you see this with people that are good at creating stuff. They have built one thing really well, whether it's their YouTube channel or a Substack newsletter or something, like they've gotten really good at that. Then they start branching out, and maybe they have like a good Instagram page, or maybe they started with a really good website, and now they've started a newsletter where people can subscribe. So I've tried to be better about like not trying to do all the things and try to do one thing well, and then other stuff can come from that.
Once you start one thing and you get good at it, you can't help but want to
Yeah,
expand. But sometimes you can do that to your own detriment, like myself, where you're
it
like,
takes a lot
oh
of
my gosh,
time.
it really does. It takes more time than I ever realized. To do the podcast, for example, I mean, this consumes an entire, at least one whole workday every week. And so I have to plan for that. I have to recognize, like, okay, that means I've got 4 left to achieve what I need to do. And if I need to write a newsletter and case studies, which is another part of my content creation plan, that's a whole nother workday. So that means I
Yeah.
have 3 days to run my business and take care of my clients and whatever else that needs to happen. It'll take more time than you think. And I think
Yes.
it's very worth it.
It's so easy now though to like you have your podcast and here we are recording video.
Yeah, I mean, you could really spin yourself out just
Yeah.
creating more and more and more content out of one interaction. Personally, what I've observed is the model of you get the job and then your focus is just to do the job and then you retire. That kind of model, I don't feel like really exists as often anymore. And so, what happens when your employer isn't something that's static? Well, now you need to be able to network and stay aware of new opportunities and changes in policy and communicate to others what value you create in society. And I can't think of a better avenue to tackle all of those things than to be engaged in some form of content creation. So I'd love your perspective on that. What trends are you seeing going into the future of careers for scientists, and what role does science communication play in all of that?
I just had this conversation for the podcast for our School of Medicine and Dentistry, and the guests brought up like because she is took the traditional path for academia, got a PhD, did a postdoc, went to teach, and then quickly got interested into science communication and then started writing for different publications and still teaches and works at her institution, but has discovered ways to kind of branch out and build that digital reputation. You worked for a long time and you got something called a pension. There was a benefit there of staying in one place for a long time because you got that pension and that took care of you in your retirement. That has slowly gone away. And now you could rely a little bit more on things like Social Security that you built up over time and whatnot. And it's becoming harder and harder to rely on some of those programs that employers set up for employees to retire with. It seems like now AI and all the technology at our disposal, it's almost a badge of honor sometimes for companies to do more with less. And I just feel like you're just seeing less and less of that. It's not that people aren't loyal. It's just that the benefits of staying in one place for so long and doing something for one institution are getting smaller and smaller. And people are seeing that they're easily replaceable. When layoffs happen, it's like you're at a place for so long and then just one day, boom, we have to cut 1,000 people or whatever it is. And then you're out. So I think creating content and building your reputation online somewhere with content creation is like a way to just kind of keep your portfolio current and showcasing what you're good at. And that you don't want to start that when you're all of a sudden out of a job, maybe, or just in a transition period. You don't want to be starting fresh. So I think it's important then to, as you're going along in your career, to make it a point to talk about what you're doing. And that can hopefully set you up if and when your full time job doesn't maybe work out or you want to transition careers. And I think more and more people looking to hire, that's where they're going. They're going to places like LinkedIn to look at future employees. I've heard from faculty at the University of Rochester that if they go online and see somebody doesn't have a LinkedIn page set up or there's a picture but nothing else, and then they have another candidate that's built out a nice profile, they talk about what they do, they've shared content, they've engaged, like they're more likely to look at them.
That sort of mutual loyalty between company and employee, that commitment to one another is dissolving a bit to allow both sides to be more democratized in terms
Yeah.
of I can hire whoever I want, I can work for whoever I want, I can do different levels of capacity for different employers and employees. And then we can sort of hop on to different train cars to advance us to where we want to go and then leave and then go to another one that takes us where we want to go. I think a lot of that is because of content creation. I think it's because of transportation advancements that have happened in the last like 100 years. A lot of that relates to it. It's opening up more freedom for everybody because now we don't need that mutual loyalty to survive, I hope. But these are some big philosophical, societal things that I don't have all the answers to. But it's just stuff that I'm noticing where more than ever, I hear in those rooms where people make decisions about who to invite for a keynote speaker or who to hire as a new scientist in a research center, a lot of the times their presence online has a huge impact on that.
That is so true. Once you start posting and building a reputation around a specific topic, that's establishing expertise. And I think when people, like you said, that are thinking about who to invite for a keynote presentation, see like, oh, so and so has, look at all this stuff they've created. They have this awesome YouTube presence and talk about this stuff all the time. Clearly, that I think they could come and talk to our audience about XYZ. Yeah, it comes into play a lot now. And I think it's cool because more and more people are seeing that they have easy access to create things that they enjoy or do things that they enjoy. Like if you're a scientist and love to make videos, it is so easy now to make a video and talk about stuff you love and put it out there for the world to see. And sometimes that's detriment and sometimes that's for the benefit. I think there's more opportunity now and people have more opportunity to explore their interests and talk about things than you did even 15, 20 years ago.
I think it's as easy as you make it. You can set your environment up in a way where you have a camera that's separate from your phone that is always set up and ready to record in the
Yeah.
lab. That's an option to you. Assuming the resources are there, that can be an option. There are three primary functions that I navigate in my own interaction with content on the web, and that's staying aware, showing my work, and modeling my mission. The content that comes from each of those spaces is slightly different. Like staying aware, this is where I would like my newsletter to go, and maybe you can relate to this with your newsletter. Consuming important factual news as it relates to helping scientists broaden their societal impacts, I think is really valuable to me, especially with my mission. And so if I have to stay aware of that information anyway, wouldn't it be really helpful if I served the role as curator and helped other people stay aware of the recent developments through my newsletter? That would be an easy way to integrate content creation in my workflow. I'm already having to do that, or I've chosen to do that. So then just turning it and sharing what I'm already doing feels natural to me. In terms of showing my work, I do all these incredible initiatives and projects with my clients who are research centers, who are large scale, expected to do large scale broader impacts. And so in coordinating their databases or planning some of their outreach events or designing 3D animations, like there's all this incredible work that I get to do. So why not show it? Why not write it into a case study? Why not share the frameworks that we use to achieve these things, or the tools that we've created, the templates? Why not templatize the problems that I've already solved or that I'm currently working on and just share them as an ill-defined problem that I'm still working on that invite other people in to help? I think having case studies and examples serves people really well. Can you share any specific examples or case studies of researchers that you've worked with who've effectively expanded their reach and impact through your communication efforts with them?
In trainings or talks I do, this comes up once in a while. I've heard examples of collaboration opportunities coming up through stuff that people have shared and others seeing it and being like, "Oh, I do that same thing. Let's talk. Maybe we can collaborate on a project together." I have seen people get access to share their message with media and on like local media channels through posting on social, like especially during the pandemic. We had some folks at U of R that were heavy X users at the time, and if they saw misinformation being shared, they would go on X and tag the media and be like, tag local media channels and be like, actually, this is how it is. Here's what the data is showing, and here's what we're doing at the hospital. I'd love to come on and talk about it. I think people are always kind of just surprised at the connections you can build and the opportunities that come from sharing, whether it's just making a new connection, adding somebody to your network, or a job opportunity, or a collaboration opportunity, or a speaking engagement. And even just getting appearances on local media is a big, I know not everybody's going to be interested in that, but that is a great example of using your science and background to share it with the public, that folks that need to know it the most in a specific time.
When you work with someone and it's fun and engaging, or their insights really helped you do an unlock, you shouted out to Ayana as the podcaster who brought you into this space. And I love the idea of trying to remember who brought you into things and highlight them and celebrate them. I wonder if you had a slide at the end of all the trainings that you do that say, like, if this impacts you in any way in the future of your career, please tell me. And encouraging that. Like, having those case studies would be really great for your brand, but also just really great examples to keep you going.
It's sometimes you post something and nobody does anything with it, nobody says anything, you don't know, the views on your podcast aren't going up. But then you get one email saying, like, I saw your interview with so and so and it really resonated, or I loved it, I thought it was so, and it's like, oh, it's all worth it, like, I'm going to keep sharing. So yeah, I love that idea of, that's a great way to sort of start engaging and getting some feedback, because it is hard to put some of this stuff. Sometimes it's hard to like quantify it, or it's hard to show like this talk did this thing. But yeah, just getting folks to share their stories would be a great thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure to have a lot of subscribers and views.
Yeah.
And there's also, it's very hard to create content. So whenever you're out there doing that with very little positive reinforcement in terms of like views and subscriber counts, those little one-off comments that you get are the only fuel that really keeps you going after a while. I tend
Totally.
to try to screenshot them and put them in an album, like a photo album on my phone, so that when I'm feeling like what I do doesn't matter, or what a waste of time this all is, wouldn't it just be easier to not create content today? Wouldn't it just be easier to give up? I'll look at those pictures and the screenshots that I've made of all the people who over the years have said, like, hey, this really helped me do this. And remember that for every one of those that I get, there's probably 10 others who agree, but just didn't have a chance to write that.
It's also helpful, and I don't know where I heard this, but I heard it from somebody on the internet, that those view counts, like say you get 10 views, well, picture that in like 10 people in a conference room paying attention to you. Like, that's pretty cool. Or like you get 50 views, like that's a big classroom of people maybe listening. Picture it in a space. Or then, geez, you get 200 views on something. That's a big lecture hall, and you'd be nervous presenting in front of those people in person. So like, it helps when you think about it like that too. And then when you think about the audience and the people you're trying to reach, then it's pretty cool to think about it like that.
Yeah, the people you're trying to reach, it might actually be quite a small audience. And the fact
Right.
that you got 10 views of that audience is huge. In your experience, Jeff, what are some of the most effective ways for researchers to make their work more relatable and accessible to a non-expert audience?
You can just show the human side of things by showcasing what worked and what didn't work. Or like, if you can tell a story around something you're working on, that storytelling just makes things so relatable. And even if it's like something goofy, like I always give the example of Doc Brown from Back to the Future. If he was on LinkedIn today or sharing a newsletter, he could say something like, God, I was doing something in my bathroom and I fell off at my toilet and hit my head on the toilet seat, and then I had a revelation about the flux capacitor, and that's how I invented time travel. Like those kinds of stories. Like, did something like that happen to you that made you interested in a particular topic? Or was your petri dish dirty and it actually helped you discover this thing? So I feel like storytelling is so powerful, and that helps bring out the human side of especially science. And we can't always be shouting out the wins. It's important to share the struggles and things that aren't working and that you might need some help with. But I think being able to relate it back to why would somebody care and want to listen helps in humanizing the science.
There's so many aha moments or eureka moments that I've had directly following just errors of failure. And oftentimes in the writing up of the thing that followed the aha moment, usually what's included is not all the failure that
Hmm.
led to that inspiration. And I think you're right. That kind of dehumanizes us because we as humans, we experiment and we fail. And that's what makes it real. And so if you just share the highlight reel, we've all seen the effect that social media can have when we assume that everyone's highlight reel is their day to day life. We've all seen how that makes us feel dehumanized and makes us feel like there's something wrong with us for having failures in our lives. And so when a scientist can say, like, yeah, I published that paper in Science and that was really cool, but here's all of the failing that led to the inspiration that became that paper. Say that we have this astounding finding and it's highly technical. It's like if you adjust this aspect of the psychology of an assessment, student performance increases by 20% or something like that. How do we craft a compelling narrative around it?
You have to kind of think about the why. Like, what is the point in all of this that I'm doing? Like, why should anybody care? And then when you can relate it back to like a potential future impact or numbers of people that it affects, because I think about science going back to the beginning, we have these incredible vaccines that save hundreds of thousands of lives, but they didn't just come out of thin air. There's a story behind all of that and the work that goes into it. And then it's saving this amount of lives every year. So that kind of like, where did this start? How did we get there? What did we try? What didn't work? What are we still working on that could help us do better? And then the impact, or it could be potential impact, like, oh, we've gotten to this point, but this is why we think it could and how many people we think it could help down the line if we keep working on XYZ.
It's kind of like you want to answer the basic questions that give people context to understand your discovery.
Yeah.
So the like who, what, when, why, how sorts of things. And then connect it to something that matters to people. So often we share it because it matters to us. And that's beautiful that our research matters to us. But if we get lost in that highly technical, tiny aspect of the knowledge that we're advancing, we forget to connect it to something that's big picture, like the environment or society or justice or freedom, like things that humans naturally take toward and often care deeply about, can lose meaning beyond what it means to you. Is that fair?
That made me think about, so our vice president of research at our institution gave an update, like a regular webinar series that our leadership does to the institution, just on kind of like things that are top of mind and what leadership is doing to address things going on in our society right now, like trust in science and funding and things like that. He gave a great example. The ending question was, I can't remember the exact words, but it was something like, what can we do to continue to just kind of express the importance of science and the things that we do at the institution? And he gave a lot of great examples of just like the vaccines, like LASIK eye surgery, like a big part of starting that happened at University of Rochester. But then it was, he gave the example of like John F. Kennedy said, like, we're going to put somebody on the moon and we're going to bring them home. I don't know if that was the exact quote, but like that was a big mission. And it's easy to step back and be like, well, why? But then you think about everything that comes from that, just like the technology innovations, the communications that had to happen, just the overall spirit that that probably gave to everybody watching and the inspiration that people got from seeing something like that. So think about everything that comes with this big discovery or this big accomplishment.
We're at the part of the podcast where I'd love to build community amongst people who are broadening the impacts of STEM. And so, what I do is I have past guests ask questions of future guests. So, our past guest is Daniel McGarvey. So, his question's challenging, so brace yourself.
Oftentimes, I think what's most important about the science is the process itself. It's not the result. It's a way of looking at the world and thinking about the world and having a game plan to deal with the world. When the storyline is one about process or journey versus a result of obvious importance, how do they think about building narrative and kind of storyboarding around that? Because I think if we could start to fill the airwaves with the beauty of a scientific way of looking at the world and how much that enriches people's lives, that would be a very good thing to do.
This question makes me think of somebody I talked to the other day who was sure that they were going to go into studying neurodegenerative diseases and now works on cryo-EM work and RNA. They made that switch unwillingly. A PI left that they were close to and then were kind of adopted by another PI and ended up being very interested in the new research that they were doing and had a hard time switching that path up, but did it. Down the road, after publishing some work, was at a presentation where her research was cited and it was shown on the big screen, and that made her cry. She started bawling in the audience. Her point was like, do research that makes you cry. If you're trying to figure out what your message is, what has that effect on you? Keep listening to that little voice kind of pushing you in a certain direction. And if there is some work out there or a message that makes you cry, I think that's a good way to find it.
I was having dinner with a MRSEC director. MRSECs are like a material science engineering research center. They were saying that the research that one of their scientists had done in cancer got shared through a clinical trial, and someone who had a very limited lifespan predicted did the clinical trial and got to live 4 more years. And that person was invited to the conference where the scientists were presenting their research, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room because the person got to thank the researchers whose work led to the clinical trial for those 3 years that they wouldn't have had without them. And he's like, I know it's not a lifetime, but those 3 years meant everything to me. So thank you. And it's like, whew,
That's powerful.
that's something that will make me cry.
Totally.
You know, and even if what you do isn't as life-changing as cancer research, it can be as simple as like, there's more otters in the river in this particular area. Or in my case, my research had to do with justice and assessment of chemistry. So there's maybe a group of some population of students who wouldn't have become scientists because they would have been barred as a result of their performance on an assessment. Because we made it more justice oriented, they were able to show off their talents and their success and what they were actually learning in the class. And as a result, now they're scientists. Like, I don't know how many people there are that exist as a result of that, but it's probably non-zero. So Jeff, I'm going to introduce you to our next podcast guest, who is Anissa Valentine. Anissa is incredible. She's driving workforce development in upskilling the bioinformatics space. And I wanted to invite you to ask her a question. So take your time and then just share with me what question comes to mind.
I would ask Anissa, if she were to start a podcast, what would it be called and what kinds of people would she interview?
Oh, I love that so much. Great question, Jeff. Can I highlight your newsletter to the audience?
Here's my simple website, jeffkozlovsky.com. There's me up here in the top right. You can click get my newsletter. So really, it is what it says it is. Talk about what I'm working on, what I learn along the way, questions I have for you so that maybe we can help each other. And I will also say, if you want to check out some of my podcasting work and hear from other scientists that have been through the University of Rochester Medical Center, check out our podcast called The Next Step, where science communication is certainly a part of that, but just highlighting all the diverse career paths that our researchers, graduate trainees have taken throughout their lives.
Yeah, it's a great podcast, and I'm excited to subscribe and interact with that.
This has been a lot of fun, Vanessa. I appreciate you being willing to have a non-scientist on and chat a little bit about communications.
I think a science communicator counts as a scientist.